Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned with the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show. It's the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show once again, where Roger and I talk about Edgar Rice Burroughs, the greatest adventure writer of all time. And today, we're talking about Edgar Rice Burroughs' most popular creation, and that would be, of course, Tarzan of the Apes. Tarzan of the Apes, who burst on the scene in 1912 in this story. And this story was tremendously popular. Tremendously popular. So popular that Edgar Rice Burroughs had to write another story about Tarzan, and another story, and another story after that. He ended up with 24 Tarzan novels. And it's a fantastic series of adventure books. This being, of course, the first one, Tarzan of the Apes. And in this one, Lord and Lady Greystoke are marooned on the coast of Africa. Lady Greystoke gives birth to her young son, who is soon alone because his parents are both, well, they both pass away, one after the other. And young Lord Greystoke is left all alone in the jungle, but he is saved by Kala, the ape. She takes young Tarzan, little baby Tarzan, and raises him in her tribe of apes. And it's a fantastic adventure story. It's great, a great novel of character. And I had originally been hesitant to read the Tarzan stories. I had read the Mars Adventures, the Mars series of books about John Carter of Mars, and I thought those were fantastic. But I hesitated with Tarzan because I was familiar with Tarzan only through those old black and white movies that you used to see on television back in the olden days. And to me, Tarzan was just some big naked guy who was running around in the jungle and didn't seem all that interesting to me. But fortunately, I did read this book, and I was really surprised. First of all, Tarzan is a very different character than that fella you'd find in the films. He is tremendously intelligent, ends up in the series learning dozens of languages. Really, really complex character. He is, of course, Lord Greystoke. And he is never really at home as an English lord. He's never really at home in the jungle. Although he does seem to be more at home in the jungle than he does as an English lord. He grows up with this tribe of apes until he's a young man, and that's when he comes across Jane and another group of Europeans and Americans. And that is when he finds out who he really is as Lord Greystoke. It's a fantastic story. And in fact, one of the things I hear from people when they've read this story for the first time is how surprised they are at how good it is. It's a really good book. It doesn't exactly end on a cliffhanger, but it certainly ends at a place that you wouldn't expect. And you do definitely want to know where the story goes after this one. It's a great book. And this edition that I have here is from the Library of America. This was published back in 2012 for Tarzan's 100th anniversary. It reproduces the original cover art to the first edition of Tarzan. I do have a few different editions of Tarzan. One of the notable ones is this one. This is actually the first authorized paperback edition, the first edition that was authorized by Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, and the first in the Ballantine series of Tarzan novels. It has a very simple design on the cover. This series had covers by, I don't want to get his name wrong, Richard Powers. This series had covers by Powers, and they're just really interesting covers. This one is not my favorite. My favorite is probably this one. This is a cover from Neil Adams. This is from the black bordered editions of Tarzan that I used to find all the time when I was a kid. When I was young and collecting Edgar Rice Burroughs books, this was the edition that was still in print in the early 80s, these black bordered editions of Tarzan. And they had covers by Boris Vallejo and Neil Adams. And this is Neil Adams here. And that's just a great cover of Tarzan rushing to rescue Jane. Great, great cover. Now, of course, as soon as that story was published, it was a sensation. People loved Tarzan and demanded more. So, of course, we got The Return of Tarzan. Again, my favorite cover is another Neil Adams cover, and that's this one right here. Great cover from Neil Adams for The Return of Tarzan. This is my personal favorite of all the Tarzan novels, probably just because it has so much Tarzan stuff in it. Tarzan has some adventures in Paris in the beginning of the book. He's still in civilization. Then he leaves and he works as an agent for the French government for a short period of time. And eventually, of course, ends up back in Africa, ends up having another series of adventures. He finds the lost city of Opar. Africa is just full of lost cities back in these Tarzan books. And Opar is the first lost city that he comes across. We meet Law of Opar, Law, who immediately falls in love with Tarzan. And Law is a recurring character. We're going to see more of Tarzan in the We're going to see more of Law in the Tarzan books. Great character. Wonderful adventure, The Return of Tarzan. A lot of fun, this book. And in this one, Tarzan and Jane do end up getting married at the end of this book. And by the end of The Return of Tarzan, it seems like Tarzan, or John Clayton, has given up being the ape man, and they go back to live as Lord and Lady Greystoke in London. Is that the end of Tarzan's adventures? No, this is only book 2, so obviously we're going to get more, and we do in the Beasts of Tarzan. The Beasts of Tarzan. Now, this is a great Frank Frazetta cover from the Beasts of Tarzan. Wonderful cover there for Ace, for this Ace edition. Ace published a few different Tarzan novels. They didn't publish the first one. They didn't publish the second one, but they did publish the third one, The Beasts of Tarzan. And it's a really nice cover by Frazetta. Of course, Ballantine had their authorized edition with this edition here. And again, they do a really nice cover with this, the Neil Adams cover for The Beasts of Tarzan. Now, in this one, Lord and Lady Greystoke are living in London. They have had a son, and that son is kidnapped by a fiendish villain that we actually met in the last book. He's still at large. The dastardly Rokoff is still at large. And Tarzan's son is kidnapped, so this story is about how Tarzan and Jane go after the kidnappers and try to get their son back. And it's a really intense adventure. It's something. And at one point, Tarzan is marooned on a jungle island, and he makes some friends here. He puts together a team of animals, apes and a panther, and he also runs across one of his best friends, one of the people who becomes his best friends, Mugambi. Mugambi becomes a very important character in the Tarzan books. And one thing I forgot to mention, actually, where did I put it? Here it is. One thing I forgot to mention in The Return of Tarzan is that in The Return of Tarzan, we have the first appearance of the Waziri. The Waziri, which is a tribe of native African warriors, and they befriend Tarzan, and they become very important characters in the series, the Waziri. And Mugambi, who Tarzan meets in The Beasts of Tarzan, actually becomes a member of that tribe. He's adopted into the Waziri tribe. And it's a great book, The Beasts of Tarzan. Very fast-paced adventure. And like I said, pretty intense, The Beasts of Tarzan. And then, after this is done, it could be the end, right? We've had 3 Tarzan adventures. And so is that it for the ape man? You know, he has to return. In The Son of Tarzan, he returns in The Son of Tarzan. And this is from the white bordered set of books. And these covers were done by, I don't want to get the name wrong. These, oh goodness, it doesn't say. Does it? Hold on, I'll find out. Robert Abbott. Robert Abbott. I knew that, I just forgot. Robert Abbott did this cover for The Son of Tarzan. Now, in this book, Tarzan's young son takes over the main spot of the novel, and he ends up in the jungle. He gets lost in the jungle through a set of circumstances. He runs off with Akut, the ape, an old friend of his father's, and they go off and have some thrilling adventures. And he's gone for years. He's missing for years. And he grows up much as his father did in the jungle. But he has help because he started a little bit later in life than Tarzan did. He has help from Akut. And Akut, the ape, pretty much keeps the son of Tarzan alive. And eventually, Tarzan's son grows up to be Korak, the killer. That is how he's known in the jungle, Korak, the killer. And the black bordered edition also has a Neal Adams cover, a fairly interesting one. Fairly interesting cover for The Son of Tarzan. This is one of my favorites of the series. This book is excellent. It's a masterpiece, in fact. There are those who will challenge that assertion, but I love it. It's one of my favorites of the whole series, The Son of Tarzan. It's a heck of a book. And then we have The Jewels of Opar. The Jewels of Opar. This is actually my only paperback copy of The Jewels of Opar. I have a hardcover around here somewhere, but this is my only paperback copy of The Jewels of Opar. Again, it is with the black borders. This is a very interesting Neal Adams cover, not one of his best in my opinion. Interesting angle he chooses for this Tarzan cover. Now in this one, Tarzan and Jane are living on Tarzan's estate in Africa. He's decided to move to Africa because he missed living there. And the Waziri are there, and that's where Tarzan is living now. Only Tarzan, through a series of bad investments, and, you know, he grew up with apes, so you can't give him too hard a time for having some bad investments and choosing the wrong people to take care of his money. He's broke. Tarzan has gone broke. So he decides to go back to Opar because he knows that Opar has vast treasure vaults full of gold. Full of gold. So he's got to go get some more cash. So he goes to Opar, and he runs into some trouble, as you would expect. As you would expect, he runs into trouble. And another great adventure novel, Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar, the 5th book in the series. And then we have Jungle Tales of Tarzan. And in this one, Edgar Rice Burroughs goes back to Tarzan's youth as he was growing up in the jungle. And this is the original Frank Frazetta painting for the Ace edition. And this painting is just magnificent. It's my favorite Frank Frazetta painting from the books that he painted for Tarzan. And it's excellent. This is the Neal Adams version, which is another excellent cover. This is another excellent cover of this book. And like I said, this takes Tarzan back to his youth in Africa as he has a bunch of different adventures. So it's basically a series of short stories all about Tarzan as he was growing up. And it's dynamite. It's a great book. One of my favorite Tarzan books, Jungle Tales of Tarzan. And with this book, we kind of end the first phase of Tarzan. And we enter a new phase of Tarzan when we get to this book. This is Tarzan the Untamed. And beginning with this book, Edgar Rice Burroughs writes several Tarzan books that are just full of imagination. And here we kind of reach a high point of the series. It starts off with the greatest book of the series, which is Tarzan of the Apes. But with the next few books, he really reaches great heights of imagination and excitement for this character. And we get some of the very best Tarzan books in the whole series. Starting off with this one, Tarzan the Untamed. Fantastic, fantastic book, where Tarzan runs into some trouble, as you will see from this Boris Vallejo painting. This is Tarzan starving and being attacked by a vulture. This is right from the story. And in this novel, it takes place during the First World War, where Tarzan's adversaries are the Germans. Germans don't come off all that well in this book, but, you know, it was written during World War I. And it's an excellent adventure story where Tarzan goes on the warpath, and it's just great. It's a great adventure novel. I don't want to go into the plot too much because I don't want to spoil this one. This has some stuff going on in this book. And this one is followed immediately by Tarzan the Terrible. It's Tarzan the Terrible. A better cover is this one, another great Boris Vallejo cover. And this continues on the story that began in Tarzan the Untamed, another fantastic adventure novel where Tarzan finds another lost world, and in this lost world he finds dinosaurs. Dinosaurs and some stranger things he finds in Tarzan the Terrible. Great book. And that is followed up by Tarzan and the Golden Lion. Tarzan and the Golden Lion when he runs into his ally, Jad Bal-jah, the huge golden lion, who, you know, Tarzan makes friends with. And Jad Bal-jah becomes his ally. And we see more of that golden lion in the future. Another excellent, excellent adventure novel of Tarzan. Probably a better cover is again by Boris Vallejo. Boris Vallejo really got Tarzan right. I mean, he did some magnificent covers for the Tarzan series. Some of the best covers that Tarzan's ever had were the Vallejo covers. And this one's just great for Tarzan and the Golden Lion. Now we follow that up with one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' most imaginative stories, and that would be Tarzan and the Ant-Men. Tarzan and the Ant-Men, where Tarzan runs into some tiny people, a couple groups of tiny people who are at war, and eventually Tarzan, he becomes tiny himself. This is the Boris Vallejo version of Tarzan and the Ant-Man, another great Boris Vallejo story. This is excellent. Just a fantastic, fantastic Tarzan story. Tarzan and the Ant-Men. And we follow that up with Tarzan, the Lord of the Jungle. Tarzan and the Lord of the Jungle, where he finds another lost world, another lost civilization, a pretty interesting one, which I will not spoil. Another excellent Tarzan adventure. Again, the Boris Vallejo cover is probably the best one of this book. Just look at that. That's just glorious. Glorious. And this one, the Lost World he runs into are lost members of the Knights Templar, if I'm remembering correctly. It's interesting. And that is followed up by Tarzan and the Lost Empire. This is a great Frank Frazetta cover from the Ace series of Tarzan books. And this one's beautiful, of course. Tarzan and the Lost Empire. I do not, unfortunately, have a Boris Vallejo for this one. This is the other one that I have of Tarzan and the Lost Empire. And you can tell from here, from this cover, that the Lost Empire that Tarzan runs across is a civilization descended from ancient Rome. So he runs into some ancient Romans, you know, and has some adventures that you would expect if Tarzan runs into some ancient Romans, you know, including arena fights and gladiatorial stuff. And it's awesome. It's awesome. But then we end the second phase of the Tarzan series with this one. This is Tarzan at the Earth's Core. And this is the novel where Tarzan crosses over with the Pellucidar series of books. The Pellucidar series started with At the Earth's Core. And you see, in the center of the Earth, there's a whole other world. It's hollow, the Earth's center, just in case you didn't know. There's a little sun that hangs suspended eternally in the center of the Earth, and around it are all these continents and jungles and oceans and dinosaurs, because it's a lost world, and other creatures. And Tarzan goes on a mission into Pellucidar. And this is a Roy Krenkel cover for Tarzan at the Earth's Core, a really, really good one. This is a somewhat less interesting cover for Tarzan at the Earth's Core. Probably my favorite is this kind of wild Neil Adams cover for Tarzan at the Earth's Core for the black bordered set. It's great. And what a magnificent book. And this ends that middle period of Tarzan with all of those, with Tarzan's greatest adventures, basically. This is the last of his greatest adventures. And after this, we go on to the third phase of Tarzan's career, beginning with Tarzan the Invincible. Tarzan the Invincible. And I've got a few different editions of this one. This is the white bordered edition, which is actually a pretty nice cover. I like that one a lot. But my favorite is the Neil Adams, and that's the Neil Adams right there for Tarzan the Invincible. And beginning with this, we have a series of books with the adventures of Tarzan that are not quite as good as the adventures that came just previous. In these, Edgar Rice Burroughs is reusing a lot of elements that he used previously in the other Tarzan books that he had written. They're excellent books. They're really good, fun adventure stories for the most part. They're just not as good or as inventive for the most part as the ones that preceded it. And so we've got Tarzan the Invincible here, and that is followed by Tarzan Triumphant. This is actually the only paperback copy I appear to have for Tarzan Triumphant, which kind of surprises me. I thought I had another one, but I have this one of Tarzan Triumphant. And then we have Tarzan and the City of Gold. Tarzan and the City of Gold, another great Neil Adams cover there. I like that one a lot. And then we have Tarzan and the Lion Man. I have a couple of editions of Tarzan and the Lion Man. This is the other one of Tarzan and the Lion Man. This was a fun book, as I recall. Then we have Tarzan and the Leopard Men. This is Tarzan and the Leopard Men. This cover is not nearly as good as this Neil Adams cover, which is just awesome. Tarzan and the Leopard Men. If I'm remembering right, and I really need to read this book again, but this was probably my least favorite Tarzan book of the series, which doesn't mean it was bad. It wasn't bad. It just was probably my least favorite of the entire series. Tarzan and the Leopard Men. I'm going to be reading it again, so maybe I'll have a different opinion. Now, this next one is actually a pretty important book in the Tarzan series, and that would be Tarzan's Quest. Tarzan's Quest, which of course has a much better cover that is done by Boris Vallejo, another excellent Boris Vallejo covers. Man, he just gets Tarzan right. Now, Tarzan's Quest is important because it is in this book that Tarzan becomes immortal. Yes, little known fact about Tarzan, he's immortal. At this point, he gains the secret of immortality. How does he gain it? I'll let you read the book because it's actually a pretty darn good book. And yeah, he becomes immortal in this story. So from this point on, he doesn't age. He doesn't age. He stays like 35 or 40 or whatever he is at this point. That is followed by Tarzan and the Forbidden City. Tarzan and the Forbidden City. Another great Boris cover there. This also was not particularly great from what I remember. It was fun, but one of the lesser Tarzan books, even though it does have this awesome cover. I mean, that cover is just fantastic. Then we get Tarzan the Magnificent, which has one of the best Boris covers. I mean, that is probably the ultimate Tarzan cover from Boris Vallejo, because it is just, I mean, it's just so Tarzan right there. That's the character. Just a perfect Tarzan picture right there. Perfect Tarzan cover. Tarzan the Magnificent. Then we get a really interesting story. So we're at the last few Tarzan books now. And this next story is really interesting. This is Tarzan and the Foreign Legion. This does not refer to the French Foreign Legion, but it's a whole other thing, Tarzan and the Foreign Legion. And this actually takes place in World War II. Another great Boris Vallejo cover there. This takes place during World War II, where Lord Greystoke, is doing his part in fighting in the war. And at one point, he has to, become Tarzan of the Apes once again. It's really interesting and very inventive. Probably the best from this third phase of Tarzan stories. It's probably the best book. Although Tarzan and the Madmen is pretty darn good. I've got a couple different editions of Tarzan and the Madmen, which use the same cover illustration in different ways. That was a good one. And then we end the original series with Tarzan and the Castaways. Tarzan and the Castaways. This actually has 3 different stories in it, every one of which are good. Every one of them are good. And this also has the very best, one of the very best Tarzan covers ever. And look at that. Another Boris Vallejo cover that is just absolutely beautiful. Just a beautiful Tarzan cover. And this is a good book. It's a really good way to wrap up the Tarzan series. But that was not the end, actually. That was not the end. Because there was left behind, when Edgar Rice Burroughs died, a partial manuscript, an unfinished manuscript of Tarzan. And that was eventually published by, of all people, Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse Comics published Tarzan the Lost Adventure. And what they did was they took this original unfinished manuscript. They gave it to Joe R. Lansdale, another writer that I like a lot. Joe R. Lansdale, who's probably best known for his Hap and Leonard series of crime novels. He's also a huge Edgar Rice Burroughs fan. And so they gave the story to him to finish, and they published it in these 4 volumes. They kind of published it as a pulp. And so this is the first volume of Tarzan the Lost Adventure. Now, these individual issues of Tarzan the Lost Adventure are really cool, not just because of the story and some great original artwork that comes along with it, but they also reprint John Coleman Burroughs, that's Edgar Rice Burroughs' son, John Coleman Burroughs' John Carter of Mars comic strip. And so far as I know, this is the only place that comic strip has been reprinted. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. Let me know if this comic strip has been reprinted anyplace else, if anyone knows. But I think this might be the only place I've ever seen it. So this is the first issue of that. This is the second issue of Tarzan the Lost Adventure. The third issue, look at that. That front cover is by Arthur Soydam. And the interior illustrations are by Gary Gianni in this particular issue. And then this is the 4th issue. This actually has some Michael Kaluta illustrations on the inside. So some of the artwork in these are really, really interesting. Tarzan, the Lost Adventure, which is the last adventure. Now, this was reprinted in a very beautiful hardcover edition, which I do not have for some mysterious reason. I don't have the hardcover edition of this. It was published as a paperback. I do have the 1-volume paperback edition with a cover which I'm not particularly thrilled by. I'm not sure why this is the cover that was chosen for this book. But, it was the 90s. It was a weird time. But it does, I believe, have some of the original artwork from the Dark Horse publication in this. Doesn't have all of it, I don't think. But it does have some of the artwork from the Dark Horse edition. So this is actually the very last Tarzan that we'll ever get from Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it was finished by Joe R. Lansdale. So that was the Tarzan series. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a fantastic set of books. Unfortunately, unlike when I was a young man, they are not all available in bookstores. I do remember when I was originally reading Edgar Rice Burroughs, you could go into any bookstore pretty much and get the whole Tarzan set of books. That hasn't been the case for a long time. So if you want to read all of the Tarzan novels, there are a few different ways you can do it. You can get ebooks, of course. A good place to find Tarzan books is eBay, because there were so many of them published for so long. There's no shortage of Tarzan books out there. So you can get on eBay and you can find all of the Tarzan series. Also, Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated has, I believe they just recently finished publication of all the Tarzan novels in hardcover. And every single hardcover has a cover by Joe Jusko. He does the whole set of books, which is kind of incredible. And it's a really nice set of books. I have the first 3 of them. The cover for Tarzan, The Return of Tarzan, is just beautiful. I mean, Law looks perfect. That's a perfect Law right there in this scene from Opar. It's a really nice set of books, and it has a bunch of extras at the back. So each volume of their Tarzan set has some letters and all kinds of other things, advertisements, photographs, just all kinds of extras you'll find at the back of these books. And so they're pretty cool. They are a little pricey, though. They are a little pricey for these hardcovers. I don't know if Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated is ever going to put these out in paperback. That would be interesting. But they're in the process of reprinting all of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books. They started with the Tarzan series, and they did a beautiful set of books for Tarzan. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what their Mars series is going to end up looking like. They're going to start the Mars series, I think, pretty soon, republishing those. Again, with Joe Jusko covers. So that's awesome right there. So you can get this set of books. It is, like I said, pricey, but they are out there, and they published all of them. They published all the Tarzan books, I believe. So that's another way to go. But they are readily available, the Tarzan books. You just have to, order them. But they're great, and they're well worth finding. Magnificent set of adventure novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and it definitely has some of his best work. And that's all I have to say, because I've rambled on for long enough about Tarzan. I will catch you next time.